HaMelech Yoshev ay 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 al kiseram v'nisa shochen ad maron v'kadosh shemo v'chatuv v'anu tzadikim b'Adonai ay 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 Laishrim Navaha Tehillah Bifi Yisharim Titromam Udivrei Tzadikim Tiparach Ay 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 Uvushon Chasidim Tigadash Ay Uvkerev Kiroshim Titalal Lehodod lahalel leshabeach lefa'el romem ladel levarech lale al kol ha'es al kol divrei shirot v'tish b'chod David ben Yishaya v'cha mishichecha Brachot ve'odaot methaver lam Baruch atah Adonai Ehel melech gadol b'tish b'chod El ha'odaot Adon haniflot Habocher b'shirei zimra ay 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 Melech el chei olamim.
Middle of page 70.
Yikadav Shemei Rabbah B'yamah divrach hirotei v'mich malchutei V'chaychon of Yom Echon of Chayir Kol Beit Yisrael Bagalav Izman Kariv Imru Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah Barach L'olam L'mei Amaya Yitparach V'yishtabach V'yitpoav Yitramam V'yitnasei V'yitadav V'yitalev V'yitalav Shmei Kudsha Brichu Leila Leila Mikol Berkatav V'shirata Tush Berkatav V'nechamata Damiram B'yamah V'imru Amen
71.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach.
Baruch Adonai Borach Leolam Vahed.
Baruch Adonai hamavorach Leolam Vahed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Hapoteach lanu sharei rachamim umeir eineim hamechakim lislichato. Yotzer or uvorech oshech, Oseh shalom uvorei et hakol, Olam be'etzar chayim, Orot me'ofel, Amar vayehi.
Service continues, page 75.
וכולם מקבלים עליהם ומחות שמיים זה מזה ונותנים רשות זה לזה להגדיץ יוצרם בנחת רוח בסופה ברוח ונימה קדושה כולם כאחד עונים ואומרים ביראה קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך הארץ כבודו והאופנים וחיות הקודש רץ גדול בידסים למצרפים לעומתם משבחים ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו אור חדש על ציון תאיר ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות.
Page 76, we continue silently at the top, and Neil will finish for us toward the bottom.
וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול סלע באמת להודות לך ליחדך באהבה ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה.
77 for Shema.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivol, Malchuto Leolam Avoed.
We continue in silent prayer.
Adonai Elohechem Emet.
Continue silently until page 80.
Tehilot Leil Elyon Baruch Hu Vorach. Moshe u'Miriam u'Bnei Yisrael echanu shira b'simcha rabba v'yamru chulam mi chamocha bailim Adonai mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh norati lo'ot osef ele shira chadasha shibchu gilim lishtimcha sfadayam yachad kulam hodu v'himlichu v'yamaru Adonai yimloch li'olam v'ed.
As we have now arrived at the morning Amidah, since the rest of the service today is largely communal, we are going to do the Shacharit Amidah as entirely silent, giving each of us a chance to invite perspective on our lives through reflection, through readings, and through davening. The Silent Amidah will begin on page 213 and go through page 221. As it says in the page, I was just checking that the teacher's edition matches the student thinking, and we follow the instructions there. We prepare for it now at the top of page 8, we prepare at the bottom of page 80 with Sur Yisrael, and then head directly into contemplation, readings, liturgy, or what you see on your screen. We face the ark for Sur Yisrael.
Tzor Yisrael, Kuma be'ezrat Yisrael, U'teichinu mecha, Yehuda ve'Yisrael. Go aleinu, Adonai tzivot shemo, Kedosh
We continue on page 256. If you're still in your meditations, just mute us temporarily and continue as the rest of us continue 256.
ובכן לכל הכויחתי לבוכן לבבותי ביום דין לגלה עמוקות בדין לדובר מישרים ביום דין לגוגה דעות בדין לוותיק ויוסך חסרי ביום דין לזוכר ביתו בדין לחומי המסלב ביום דין לתהה חוסה בדין ליודע מחשבות ביום דין לחובש חזו בדין ללובש צדקות ביום דין למוכר עבודות בדין לנורא תהילות ביום דין לסולח למוסף בדין לעונה לקורב ביום דין לפועל לחלמה בדין לצופה נסתרות ביום דין לקונה עבדה בדין לרחם עמו ביום דין לשומר אהבה בדין לתומך ממה ביום הדין.
Since we just did the pages coming up silently, and we will be repeating them in Musaf, we continue now on page 264 with Ashamnu.
Ay, 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 Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Dibanu Dofi. Ay, 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 Havinu, Vehirshanu, Zadnu, Hamasnu, Tafahanu Sheker. Ay, 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 Yatsnu Ra, Kisafnu, Latsnu, Maradnu, Niatsnu, Sararnu, Avinu, Pashanu, Sararnu, Kishinu Oref. Ay, 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 Rashanu, Shichatnu, Tiavnu, Tainu, Titanu.
Now that we're finished the first of the two special confessionals, we turn to the next one, page 266 for the Al-Chet. And because we're commanding these internal silent spaces for Shacharit, the communal spaces later, I ask you to go through it yourself. See what connects with you through the traditional liturgy, 266 and forward.
Vial kulam Eloah selichot salach lanu mechal lanu kaper lanu Vial kulam Eloah selichot salach lanu mechal lanu kaper lanu.
The ark is opened, we're at Avinu Malkeinu, 271.
Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu Ein Lanu Melech Elata. Avinu Malkeinu Aseh Imanu Leman Shemecha. Avinu Malkeinu Chadesh Aleinu Shana Tova. Avinu Malkeinu Batel Me'aleinu Kol Gzirot Kashot. Avinu Malkeinu Batel Machshavot Sonehu. Avinu Malkeinu Hafer Atzad Oivenu. Avinu Malkeinu Karei Kol Tzara Mastir Me'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu Kalei Deva V'cherev V'rav U'shmir Mashchid V'avon U'shmat Mibnei B'nitecha. Avinu Malkeinu Salach Mechal Lavo Kol Avonotenu. Avinu Malkeinu Mecheva V'evsheinu V'chatotenu Min Egadinecha. Avinu Malkeinu Chasirenu B'tshah Shlema Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu Shlach U'farash Shlema L'cholei Amecha. Avinu Malkeinu Zacharenu B'ikaron Tov Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu B'Sefer Chaim Tovim. Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu B'Sefer Gulav Yeshua. Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu B'Sefer Parnasav V'Kalkala. Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu B'Sefer Zkuyot. Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu B'Sefer Slicha Mechila.
Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us for good in the books of life, of redemption, of income, of merit, and of forgiveness. We continue silently to the end. Avinu Malkeinu, have mercy on us. Answer us, for our deeds are insufficient. Deal with us charitably and lovingly, and redeem us.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu Vaneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu Vaneinu, Ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu Vaneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chanenu Vaneinu, Ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, v'hoshienu.
We continue on page 272 with Kaddish Shalom. Oh.
Vayhi vinso Aaron vayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai v'yafutzu oivecha v'yanusu nesanecha mipanecha ki mitzion tetzei Torah ki mitzion tetzei Torah ulevar Adonai miYerushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Apayim, v'Rav Chesed v'Emet, Notzer Chesed Alafim, Notzer Avon v'Fesha v'Chata v'Nakeh. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'nara Shemo. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'nara Shemo. Gadlu l'Adonai iti, u'neromem Shemo yachdav.
And the ark is closed. I apologize for the misdirection a moment ago, I meant to say that we were heading directly into the Torah service. The high priest and I am far from a high priest, but has many mistakes to apologize on Yom Kippur, and that is one of the unintentional errors I will add to my apologies. We have arrived, thankfully, at the Torah service and its beauty. I have more to say about the content later, and I'll do that before we get to the Haftarah. But for now, I want you to take in the marginal notes, and I want you to take in the text of it itself as we begin the Torah readings on page 278, Leviticus 16, the Holiness Code, preceded by the blessings.
Baruch Hu Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam, Asher b'chabanu mikol ha'avim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah. Amen.
Amen. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe acharei ma'ot shnei b'nei Aaron v'korvatam lifnei Adonai vayamutu. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe daber el Aaron achicha v'yal yavo v'cholet el hakodesh mibeit laparochet el pnei hakaporet asher al Haron v'lo yamut ki be'anan ere'eh al hakaporet Bizot yavo Aaron el hakodesh v'far ben bakar lechatat ve'ayilo la'a ktonet bad kodesh yilbash u'michnasei vad yiyu al b'saro u'v'avnei bad yachkor u'v'mitznefet bad yitznov bigdei kodesh hem v'rachatz b'mayim et b'saro u'levesham u'meyet Adad b'nei Yisrael yikach shnei sirei izim lechatat ve'ayelecha le'olah v'ikriv Aaron et par hachatat asher lo v'chiper ba'ado uva'ad beito.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam, Asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nota b'chochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah. Amen.
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. V'lakach et shnei haseirim v'ha'amid otam lifnei Adonai פתח המועד, ונתן אהרון על שני השעירים גורלות, גורל אחד לאדוני וגורל אחד לעזאזל. והקריב אהרון את השעיר אשר עלה עליו הגורל לאדוני, ויעשהו חטאת, והשעיר אשר עלה עליו הגורל לעזאזל, יעמוד חי לפני אדוני לכפר עליו, ושלח אותו לעזאזל המדברה. והקריב אהרון את פר החטאת אשר לו, וכיפר בעדו ובעד ביתו, ושחט את פר החטאת אשר לו.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Adonai Hambarach, Baruch Adonai Hambarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher bachar banu mikol hamim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. ולקח מלוא המחתה, גחלי אש מעל המזבח מלפני אדוני, ומלוא חופניו כתורת סמים דקה, והביא מבית לפרוכת, ונתן את הקטורת על האש לפני אדוני, וכיסה ענן הקטורת את הכפורת אשר על העדות ולא ימות. ולקח מדם הפר והיזב אצבעו על פני הכפורת קדמה, ולפני הכפורת יזה 7 פעמים מן הדם באצבעו, ושחט את שעיר החטאת אשר לעם, והביא את עמו אל מבית לפרוכת, ויעשה את עמו כאשר עשה לדם הפר, והיזה אותו על הכפורת ולבני הכפורת, וכיפר על הקודש מטומאות בני ישראל ומפשעיהם לכל חטאותם, וכן יעשה לאוהל מועד השוכן איתם בתוך טומאותם. וכל אדם לא יהיה באוהל מועד בבואו לכפר בקודש עד צאתו, וכיפר בעדו ובעד ביתו ובעד כל קהל ישראל.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Baruch hu es Adonai Hambarach, Baruch Adonai Hambarach Le'olam Va'ed, Baruch Adonai Hambarach Le'olam Va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
אמן. ויצא אל המזבח אשר לפני אדוני וכיפר עליו, ולקח מדם הפר ומדם השעיר, ונתן על קרנות המזבח סביב, והיזה עליו מן הדם באצבעו 7 פעמים, וטיהרו וקידשו מטומאות בני ישראל. וכילה מכפר את הקודש ואת אוהל המועד ואת המזבח, והקריב את השעיר החי. ושמח אהרון את 2 ידיו על ראש השעיר החי, והתוודע עליו את כל עוונות בני ישראל ואת כל פשעיהם לכל חטאותם, ונתן אותם על ראש השעיר, ושילח ביד איש איתי המדברה, ונשא השעיר עליו את כל עוונותם אל ארץ גזירה, ושילח את השעיר במדבר. ובא אהרון אל אוהל המועד, ופשט את בגדי הבד אשר לבש בבואו לקודש, והניחם שם. ורחץ את בשרו במים במקום קדוש, ולבש את בגדיו, ויעשה תולתו ואת תולת העם, וכיפר בעדו ובעד העם.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu toras emes, v'chayei olam nata b'sochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach, Baruch Adonai hamavorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. ואת חלב החטאת יקטיר המזבחה, המשלח את השעיר לעזאזל יכבס בגדיו, ורחץ את בשרו במים, ואחרי כן יבוא למחנה. ואת פר החטאת ואת שעיר החטאת, אשר הובא את עמם לכפר בקודש, יוציא אל מחוץ למחנה, ושרפו באש את אורתם ואת בשרם ואת פרשם, והשורף אותם יכבס בגדיו ורחץ בשרו במים, ואחרי כן יבוא אל המחנה. והייתה לכם לחוקת עולם בחודש השביעי, בעשור לחודש תענו נפשותיכם, וכל מלאכה לא תעשו, האזרח והגר הגר בתוככם, כי ביום הזה יכפר עליכם לטהר אתכם מכל חטאותיכם, לפני אדוני תטהרו.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen.
Baruch hu Adonai v'orach. Baruch Adonai v'orach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Shabbat Shabbaton hi lachem, v'initem nafshotechem chukat olam, v'chiper hakohen asher yimshach oto, v'asher yimale et yado lachahen tachat aviv, v'lavash et bigdei habad bigdei hakodesh, v'chiper et midash hakodesh v'yato hel moed, v'yat hamizbeach yechaper, v'yal hakohanim, v'yal kol amakahal yechaper, v'yitazot lachem l'chukat olam, l'chaper al bnei Yisrael mikol chatotam achat bashana, v'yas kasher tziva Adonai et Moshe. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hagomel l'chayavim tovot, shegmalani kol tov.
Mi shegamaleth kol tov, hu yigmaleth kol tov selah. Amen. Dina, you have no idea how powerful it is to hear your voice this year and to be benching Gomel together. Welcome back. The sound of your healing and of your voice connects us in a way during this year that is hard to put into words. I also am very grateful for sharing this community with the voices of Susie and Arnie, Barry and Barbara, Harlene and Henry, Sam, Barb, and Art, Helen and David. And Helen, I was thinking about you a lot last night during the sermon. I hope you heard it. I hope you knew I was thinking about you. And we will continue in a moment with the beautiful voices, first of the Maftir, and then L'Dor Vador, the Haftarah, the words of the anonymous prophet from Max Edox, Hannah Rubinstein, Ishai Sussman-Yitzhaki, and Rachel Perlman. I want to share a few words about the scapegoat today because I believe they absolutely need to be said this year. Get comfortable. So this is a time, stretch out, maybe do some rabbi yoga at the same time, get in the right position, and let's explore this concept of the scapegoat. And it's a little bit challenging. Likely the most profound explanation in my experience of the scapegoat comes from the legendary 20th century thinker René Girard. Raised in France, but whose academic career later was mostly in America, first at Indiana and then for so long at Stanford. He's actually one of the few quasi-American academics who was immortalized as one of the 40 immortels, the immortals, in the Académie Française. His theory goes like this: all human society is based on the inclusionary force that we all want the same things. And you should want what others want, therefore. Be like us and imitate us. Imitation steers our sexual longings and our Wall Street trends. When an advertisement beckons you to join the glamorous people in the frame by drinking their beverage or driving their car, we are given to believe that there is plenty for all. But then the contrary force, the exclusionary force, follows. Problems arise when scarcity imposes limits, or when envy eyes an object that cannot be shared, or one that the possessor has no wish to share. Capital, an inheritance, privilege, admittance. We want what others want because we believe, he writes, that the other possesses an inner perfection that we do not. We become consumed by the wish to be like others, to be them. We hope that by acquiring their trappings, their cars, their friends, their money, their education, we will acquire their metaphysical goods, authority, wisdom, autonomy, self-fulfillment, and contentedness, which may well be largely imagined anyway. So there's an ironic jealousy of one side to another. One wants the perceived metaphysical possession of the other side. For example, I think the progressives want the perceived unending access to money and education, elite education, going to the front of the line for employment. They want that for everybody, not just for those. And those on the right, I think, actually want something they perceive on the left. A certain kind of love and sympathy and social cohesion and common support. Even a love based on skin color. Even love based on collective consolation in a history of victimization. And so they produce their own tribe, their own ideology of whites as the victims, with a common heritage of American whiteness largely fabricated, ready to love the disaffected person, the disaffected white person, skimming through social media, feeling alone and disaffected. So we live in a crazy dynamic. Social cohesion is based on you wanting what others want, but it's also based on you not being able to get what you want. And so you have to deal with profound disappointment and frustration. And so the nature of society with the two opposing forces, centripetal and centrifugal, they builds and builds and builds, according to Girard. And as it does, as the tension needs to be released, the rhetoric of the society will change. There is a third party to blame. They are responsible. They are the other. Violence against them is, well, it's not something we wish for. But, as people say on the streets outside Beth Israel, It would make logical sense. Maybe it makes more than logical sense. Social cohesion can only be restored, according to Girard, through the blame of something outside the system and then come together in violence against this thing. After all, challenging oneself would mean questioning why we want what we want at all, and maybe asking whether what it is we want, what we're all striving for in this kind of life of technology and social status, economic and environmental exploitation, whether it's the right thing to be desiring at all, rather than trying to get it for everybody, wondering, is there a different way? What are we willing to give up? It's natural to focus on who is keeping us from who is getting what we want, and maybe questioning what kind of life we want. Is their evil plan to keep us from achieving it when they want to hoard it for themselves? What distinguished Girard and frustrated his critics was his view of Judaism and, in a different way, Christianity. For a late 20th century French theorist who did most of his work in America, one would expect that religion is the culprit here, encouraging people to commit violence against the others to protect the tribe. But since the conundrum of desire and coveting is not caused by religion, it's caused by any social coming together, it's the foundation of every society, religion actually, properly practiced, can be a way of alleviating the violence. He says that by first creating invisible forces that are responsible for our inability to have what others have in equal measure, we can do violence against the invisible, which is a much healthier strategy. We must take arms against the demons, against the evil inclination, as Neil chanted, against the Yetzer Hara, against the Satan, whose shofar blast interrupts. They're the problem. So let's kill the evil inclination. Let's kill the invisible forces, not actual things, not actual people. Much better to have an invisible scapegoat than to attack a human scapegoat. And of course, these solutions are temporarily effective. When a society is being pulled apart by false promise and imitation, real violence against a human scapegoat is almost inevitable to relieve the pressure. And we Jews know what that's like, not just in Nazi Germany and the European countries who eagerly handed over Jews for slaughter, but we know it today. And that's why the scapegoat needs to be lingered with for this moment. We have people, according to a recent NPR story, they get online to Google or to search social media about George Soros. And they're taken to a QAnon conspiracy theory. Maybe it's congressional candidate Marjorie Taylor Greene accusing George Soros and the Rothschild family of being in a cabal of democratic pedophiles, labeling them as enemies of the people. And maybe, as researchers have pointed out, like Gregory Stanton, formerly of George Mason University professor of genocide studies, it's not accidental that the Hollywood cabal is a signal of Jews. Democrats are a signal of Jews. It is the protocols of the elders of Zion dressed up in a different way. The fact that they're all engaged in some secret child sex trafficking ring bears more than a little resemblance to the blood libel accusation. According to a recent study that quoted in USA Today, almost 2/3 of millennials and Generation Zers don't know that 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, and almost half can't name a single concentration camp. In New York, who ranked among the bottom 10 states in the analysis of Holocaust knowledge, nearly 20% of millennials and Generation Zers incorrectly believe that Jews caused the Holocaust, 20%. The sort of denial and distortion around the causes of the Holocaust is a form of anti-Semitism, said Gretchen Skidmore, the director of education initiatives for the Levine Family Institute for Holocaust Education at the United States Holocaust Museum. The results come amid a rise in anti-Semitic incidents around the US in recent years. The Anti-Defamation League said in May that it had recorded an all-time high of anti-Semitic incidents in 2019 since it began tracking such events in 1979. My first gigs as an adjunct lecturer were in the Cal State University system, where I started out teaching in the Ethnic Studies Department on the Hayward campus just south of Berkeley. To think that but 20 years ago, I was recruited to help teach on immigration history of Jews in America and its connection to other ethnic groups and discrimination cooperatively with lecturers on the oppression of ethnicities in America. And now 20 years later, Governor Newsom signed into law a requirement that all Cal State students take a course in the Ethnic Studies department, but focusing on Native American, African American, Asian American, and Latina and Latino studies, with, despite protests, Jewish studies left out. And now there's a bill before Governor Newsom making mandatory a high school requirement in California to teach racism in this country. And again, Jewish groups have pointed out that the proposed curricula essentially eliminate discussion of anti-Semitism. Meanwhile, San Francisco State invited Leila Khaled, the famous unrepentant PLO hijacker terrorist who had cosmetic surgery back in the day so she could even hijack a second time without being detected, to speak at their session on, quote, justice, gender, and resistance. Nothing strange about that. The president of the university defended it. Even Zoom and Facebook, not exactly known for great leaders in this area, refused to carry it because it violated their already rather thin terms of service. It was carried by YouTube until they stopped the stream 23 minutes into the talk, as she called for fighting the occupiers by whatever means possible, including weapons. To get YouTube and Facebook to remove something, it's got to be pretty offensive. In the year 2020, it has now become commonplace that to call the Palestinian Arabs of Israel the indigenous people to the land, and that of Jews as colonialist. This has become a practically undisputed norm in some of the circles I run in, despite the fact that Jews have resided in the land for at least 3,000 years. Also new in the contemporary essays I read is the statement that Israel is perpetrating a Palestinian genocide. So I tried to go to the Palestinian groups that say this. They're quoted by Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, both highly invested in global condemnation of Israel. So I read their most recent report. According to them, in 2019, both agree, based on Palestinian reporting, that approximately 100 Palestinians were killed by Israeli forces in 2019. Many of those, they write, maybe half, were engaged in attacking Israeli forces or attempting to enter Israel in order to do so. During this time, 1,378 rockets were fired toward Israeli population centers during 2019. One of those killed a Palestinian mother of 9 and her toddler. We are blamed for being the cause of that act because we forced them into it. Human Rights Watch also notes that Hamas authorities held during this time 1,885 Palestinians in detention for crimes ranging from journalism to demonstrating to unnatural intercourse, as gay relationships are punished by a 10-year sentence. To call the deaths of 100 people, which are tragic, and I regret them, and I think we should limit them, if not eliminate them, but to call those attacks a Zionist genocide of the Palestinian people is nothing other than an act of gross scapegoating and of gross anti-Semitism. Even for those of us on the left who consider Israel stained by its racism and its human rights abuses, as the country of the United States is as well, and that those abuses are largely targeted in Israel at people of color, Jewish and not Jewish, Israeli and Arab and Bedouin, we have to wonder whether this is the basis for scapegoating Jews, or whether this is not an earned moniker, but a resurgence of the kind of anti-Semitism Girard was explaining, the kind that sets the stage for eliminating violence against the scapegoat. The Palestinian people are crying out in pain, and we need to hear their cries, and we need to end the abuses against them. They are reprehensible. They are against Torah. But to give sanction to groups who are saying that it's us, that they're saying they're with us, but at the same time promoting our destruction in a time of rampant legitimated anti-Semitism is folly. Racism and anti-Semitism are two sides of the same coin. Racism is the conspiratorial belief that people of color deserve their disadvantage, while anti-Semitism is the conspiratorial belief that Jews have an unfair advantage and therefore are causing others to be deprived, maybe of the metaphysical gifts they see in us. You cannot get rid of one while condoning the other. And we know why. Because the innocent scapegoat has to be the cause of why people aren't getting what they think they deserve, because they think it requires a privilege that another has seized. Anti-Semitism is at its heart the belief that Jews have figured out a way to unjustly hoard privilege for themselves at the cost of others. It's the reason why people say it's a Palestinian genocide. It's the reason people say they're indigenous people to the land. It's the reason we only got there in the late 19th century. So what would a healthier model look like? Well, I have to warn you, it's probably impossible to achieve, according to Girard. But if we had to say, if we could truly reach our potential, what would we do with the anxiety, the frustration, the hatred, and the need to scapegoat? It would be to assemble the entire people, every single one, and to acknowledge that it's not a demon's fault or a scapegoat's fault, that we are not equitably distributing the social goods. We could kill the bankers, we could kill the politicians voted into office by their constituents, we could kill the boogaloos, we can stop the immigrants and the refugees, but somehow that's not going to get rid of my kid not getting into U of M, or my out-of-work son getting a good-paying job in a starter home. And so we assemble the whole people to talk about it and to realize that. And what if this people who got together said that it's not a part of the whole that is to blame, or an outsider who's to blame for inequality, anxiety, and the loosening of the social bonds, but it's we ourselves as an entire collective unit? What if it's the we that all of us are a part of? What if we could say that we are one, and it's our own shortcomings that produce inequality, destruction? And so let's not talk about who is damned and who is saved, but let's say we're all in this together, for that's how God perceives us. And let's do a communal confession. And what if we could say, let's spend 25 hours together, and each of us reflect on whether the motivations that drive us are to be respected? What if maybe, just maybe, what if what we're all chasing is not worth chasing after? What if we could all live with less in a simpler way? Or what if we could find worth in the sight of God through values that aren't about accumulation and social status? What if we could think that it's not other people that have the answer, but the answer is with us in this reflection and process? So what if we could alleviate the pressure that leads to hate and violence by finding some point of equilibrium between rethinking the goals that we're chasing and rethinking our individual and collective role in inequality and dissension and scapegoating itself? And what if after all this, we don't actually kill the scapegoat at all, but we recognize that the scapegoat is innocent all along, and we send it outside the tribe, back to the invisible demon that stays at a distance, and we kind of know is our own fabrication? But wouldn't that be impossible? No religion would ever be smart enough to do that. No tribe would be able to understand that, practice that, and do that. No tribe would take the time to realize that our life is spent participating in a system that needs profound change from within and profound self-therapy, not to find the cause of our problems in one people or one group. If we're going to live in some fantasy land where such psychological, ethical, and social self-knowledge were possible, linked to an actual core spiritual practice of the tribe, then Rabbi, why not just toss in that when they're doing it, they then read some prophetic words reminding them that it's not even the ritual that is effective. It's relieving the social inequities that must be addressed collectively, because it wasn't even the fast that God wanted, nor the sacrifice. Let's throw that in. Let's throw in the prophetic words of the anonymous prophet Isaiah, which will be found starting this today with chapter 48, following the Maftir Aliyah on 282.
אמן. ובעשור לחודש השביעי הזה, מקרא קודש יהיה לכם, ועיניתם את נפשותיכם, כל מלאכה לא תעשו, והקרבתם עולה לאדוני ריח ניחוח, פר בן בקר אחד אייל אחד, כבשים בני שנה 7 תמימים יהיו לכם, ומין חתם סולת בלולב השמן, 3 עשרונים לפר, 2 עשרונים לאייל האחד, יסרון לכבש האחד, לשבעת הכבשים, סיר עזים אחד חטאת, מלבד חטאת הכיפורים, ויולת התמיד, ומנחתה ונזקיהם.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim v'ratza b'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah u'v'Moshe avdo u'v'Yisrael amo u'v'nvi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek. Kara v'garon al tachsoch kashofar harem kolecha V'haged le'ami pish'am u'lavet Yaakov hatotam. Ve'oti yom yom yitroshud v'da'at deracha yichpatzun kegoy asher tzedaka asa. Umishpat Elohav lo azav. Yishaluni mishpatei tzedek kirvat Elohim yichpatzun. Lama tzamnu velo ra'ita ininu nafshenu velo teda. Hein beyom tzomchem timtzeu chayfetz v'chol atzvechem tingoshu.
Ein leriv umatzah tatzumu uv'hakod be'egrof reisha lo tatzumu chayom lehashmiya b'marom kolchem hachazeh yihiyeh tzom afcharehu yom anot adam nafsho halachof ke'agmon rosho v'sak ba'efer yatziyah halazeh tikrat tzom be'yom ratzon l'Adonai. Halo zeh tzom efcharehu pateach artzubot rasha hater agudamota v'shalach ritzutzim chafshim v'chol mota tinateku. Halo faros la'ra'ev lachmecha va'aniyim merudim tabivait kitir'e Aram v'chisito umbisharacha lo titalam.
Az yibaka kashacha olecha v'aluchatecha mehera titzmach ve'alach lefanecha tzidkecha kavod Adonai yasvecha. Az tikrav Adonai yaneh teshava ve'yomar hineni im tasir mitochecha mota shlach etzba ve'daber aven ותפק לערב נפשך ונפש נענה תשביע וזרח בחושך אורך, ואפלתך כצהריים. ונכך אדוני תמיד, והשביע בצחצחות נפשך, ועצמותיך יחליץ, ויתק הגן רבה, וכמוצא מים, אשר לא יכזבו מימיו. ובנו ממך חוות עולם, מוסדי דור ודור תקומם, וקורא לך גודל פרץ, ושובב נתיבות לשבת.
אם תשיב משבת רגלך, עשות חפשך ביום קודשי, וקראת לשבת, עונג לקדוש אדוני מכובד, וכיבדתו מעשות דרכיך, ממצוא חפשך ודבר דבור, עוז תתענג על אדוני, והרכבתיך על במתי ארץ, וכאכלתיך נחלת יעקב אביך, כי פי אדוני דיבר. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, צור כל העולמים, צדיק בכל הדורות, האל הנאמן, האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק. נאמן אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו, ונאמנים דבריך, ודבר אחד מדבריך, אחור לא ישוב ריקם. כי אל מלך נאמן ורחמן אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הנאמן בכל דבריו. רחם על ציון כי היא בית חיינו, ולעלובת נפש תושיע בימי רב ימינו. ברוך אתה אדוני, משמח ציון בבניך. שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו, באליהו הנביא עבדך, ובמלכות בית דוד משיחך, במחרה יבוא וירגל ליבנו, על כיסאו לא ישב זר, ולא ינחלו עוד אחרים את כבודו, כי בשם קודשך נשבעת לו, שלא יכבך נרו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן דוד. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום הכיפורים הזה, שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו, למחילה ולסליחה ולכפרה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד, ודברך אמת וקיים לעד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מוחל וסולל לאבותינו ולעוונות עמו בית ישראל, ומעביר אשמותינו בכל שנה ושנה, מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל ביום הכיפורים.
Our prayer on behalf of our country and its government. Pour out your blessings upon this land, upon its leader, its judges, officers, and officials who are devoted in good faith to the needs of the public. Instruct them with the laws of your Torah and help them understand your rules of justice so that peace and security, happiness and freedom will never depart from our land. We pray, Adonai, God whose spirit is in all creatures, awaken that spirit within all the inhabitants of our land. Uproot from their hearts hatred and malice, jealousy and traffic. Plant among those of different nationalities and faiths who dwell in our nation love and companionship, peace and friendship. May it therefore be your will that our land be a blessing to all who dwell on earth and cause them to dwell in friendship and freedom. Speedily fulfill the vision of your prophets. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. For all of them, from the least of them to the greatest, shall know me. And let us say, Amen.
Our God and God of our forebears, we ask your blessing for our country, for its government, for its leaders, advisors, judges, and all who exercise just and rightful authority. Teach them insights from your Torah, that they may administer all affairs of state fairly, that peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and freedom may forever abide in our midst. Creator of all flesh, bless all the inhabitants of our country with your spirit. May citizens of all races and creeds forge a common bond in true harmony to banish hatred and bigotry and to safeguard the ideals and free institutions that are the pride and glory of our country. May this land under your providence be an influence for good throughout the world, promoting among all nations and people peace and freedom, helping them to fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
אבינו שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו, ברך את מדינת ישראל, ראשית צמיחת גאולתנו, הגן עליה בעברת חסדך, ופרוס עליה סוכת שלומך, ושלח אורך ועמיתך לראשיה, שריה ויועציה, ותקנם בעצה טובה מלפניך. חזק את ידי מגיני ארץ קודשנו, והנחילם אלוהינו ישועה, ועטרת ניצחון תעטרם, ונתת שלום בארץ, ושמחת עולם ליושביה, ונאמר אמן. אבינו שבשמיים, stronghold and redeemer of the people Israel, bless the state of Israel, the beginning of our redemption. Shield it with your love. Spread over it the shelter of your peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Help them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Deliver them. Crown their efforts with triumph. Bless the land with peace and its inhabitants with lasting joy. And let us say, Amen.
Peace. May we see the day when war and bloodshed cease, when a great peace will embrace the whole world. Then nation will not threaten nation, and mankind will not again know war. For all who live on earth shall realize, we have not come into being to hate or to destroy. We have come into being to praise, to labor, and to love. Compassionate God, bless the leaders of all nations with the power of compassion. Fulfill the promise conveyed in Scripture. I will bring peace to the land, and you shall lie down, and no one shall terrify you. I will rid the land of vicious beasts, and it shall not be ravaged by war. Let love and justice flow like a mighty stream. Let peace fill the earth as the waters fill the sea. And let us say, Amen.
Our thanks for the delivery of those prayers by Elise Weisbach and Galit and Barry Dunyetz and Sarah Jane Winkleman. Our thanks to Rachel, Ishai, Hannah, and Max for reading the words of the anonymous prophet. And of course to Dina for the Torah reading. It's jarring to see and hear the pictures, hear the voice of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. someone who left a real legacy of both love and of justice. An appropriate way for us to enter with wishes for peace into Yizkor. In the Machzor, we begin on page 290. I'm so used to having the gentle, erudite, comforting words of Daryl Hafter reading her poetry at this time. And while we look forward to having her back on the Bima next year reading it, I've asked her permission, since I didn't have a chance to make a recording, to read the words for her. I know I don't do them justice. Consolation. Between the living and the dead, a mountain looms, thick with pines, smooth high trunks and needle topping. The dead float through this forest, and the trees comb us from them, separating time from time, making memories begin. Let them go. Let the dead go. Let them draw away from our embrace, trailing hands along our arms down to the fingertips, and let them leave us empty of themselves. Can you hear silence, a far-off wind, but no more conversation or debate? Not even how they met their death, a subject that would interest them, is theirs. Where childhood lives in us, they speak. Still powerful, they visit us in our dreams. And we relive our past in the magic shelter of a childhood room. But waking, we shrink from the disloyalty indifference would proclaim. Fear to lose the memory of face and voice. Fear to erase ourselves if senses fail to bring those words to mind as fresh messages. Magnified and sanctified is the name of the Lord who makes spring flowers in the season of farewells. Magnified and sanctified is the name of God who gives life. And though the tongue can hardly bear to form the words, nor eyes to look, nor tears to stop, blessed be the Lord who takes life after a measure and turns the earth again through rain, through green, white of snow, toward many tomorrows. I add, in good company with Daryl, a stanza of Muriel Rukeyser. They have gone under, and do they come again? The index of prophecy is light, and steeped therein the world with all its signatures visible. Does this life permit its living to wear strength? I mentioned on second day Rosh Hashanah how in rabbinic times and early times, many people would only have 3 sets of clothing: Shabbos clothes, the work clothes, the at-home clothes, variations thereof. And that we would tear, she says, do we have the strength to wear? Does life permit its living to wear strength? So often the garments that we ripped to show our grief and heartbreak, our tears, would then be sewn up following the grieving period. And as here we stand on Yizkor, even if we're not wearing the clothes, as our ancestors actually would be, we are still garmented in them. As we head into Yizkor, as always, I will open the Ark, and I invite you to have time of reading the proper Yizkor reading that says that you've given tzedakah or done tzedakah. When you remember them, you do something in this world to make it a blessing in their memory. And I ask you to fulfill the obligation we have to them to say those words. We begin with Neil, top of 290, and then we're going to head in to a show of some of the people that we're remembering.
Adonai ma'adam v'tedehu ben enosh v'chashvehu adam lahevadama ימיו כצל עובר.
אלוהי, נשמה שנתת בי, טהורה היא. אלוהי, נשמה שנתת בי, טהורה היא. אתה בראתה, אתה יצרת, אתה נפחת בי, ואתה משמרה בקרבי, ואתה עתיד לתלה ממני, ולהחזירה בי לעתיד לבוא. כל זמן שהנשמה בקרבי, מודה אני לפניך. כל זמן שהנשמה בקרבי, מודה אני לפניך. אדוני אלוהי ואלוהי אבותיי, ריבון כל המעשים, אדון כל הנשמות, ריבון כל המעשים, אדון כל הנשמות. אלוהי, נשמה שנתת בי, טהורה היא. אלוהי,
We continue with more of our silent time. May God remember the souls of our friends, our loved ones, the members of our holy congregation, the memories of the martyrs, victims of anti-Semitism of the past. May remember those who died just for being Israeli, just for serving in the Israel Defense Forces and their first responders. May remember everyone who has been putting themselves at risk and suffered the ultimate consequence in this country because of the consequences of the plague that affects us. May we, through our grief, through our memory, and through our commitments, bring meaning to their memories. And may our moments of meditation strengthen us and strengthen our ties that link us to their memory. May they rest in peace forever in God's presence. Amen.
Amen.
El Malei Rachamim, page 293.
El Malei Rachamim, shochen bamromim. Hamse mirucha nechona, takach ve'ashkina. B'ma'alo kedoshim etorim kezor orkira mazirihim. Lishmo koile shizkanu hayom livracha, shachu le'olamam. V'gan heidyan tiyem ruchadam, ana. Barachamim asirem b'seder kenafek le'olamihim. Utzrois porachayim et nishbodehem. Adonai hu nachalatam. V'yanuchu v'shalom amishkavotehem. V'nomar Amen.
Please, in your home, recite with me Psalm 23. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God gives me repose in green meadows and guides me over calm waters. God will revive my spirit and direct me on the right path, for that is God's way. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are at my side. Your staff and your rod comfort me. You prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall be my portion all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai in the fullness of time. Mourners Kaddish, together all of us, 294. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, Bi'alma divra kirurte v'yamlich malchute, v'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kari v'imru.
Amen.
Yehe shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lamei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei dekudesha richu. Le'ela, le'ela, min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran bi'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Hoseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. You take a moment to feel the transition from grief to comfort and to courage. Ashrei, page 295.
Ashrei yoshvei veitecha, od yehalelu chasela. Ashrei ha'am shekachalo, Ashrei ha'am she'adonai Elohav. Haromim echa Elohai hamelech v'varech hashimcha le'olam voed. V'chol yom avarechecha v'halel hashimcha le'olam voed. Gadol Adonai u'molal me'od v'li gdulato ein cheker. Dor ledor yishabach ma'asecha u'gvorotecha yagidu. Hadar kevod hodecha v'divli niflotecha sicha, v'zuz norotecha yomeru, u'doholatecha asaprena, zechera v'tuvecha yabiu, v'tzidkatecha yeraneinu, chanun v'rachom, Adonai, erech habayim u'gdal chased, tov Adonai l'chal kol, racham avakol ma'asav, yoducha Adonai, Kol ma'asecha v'chasivecha yevarechucha kevod malchucha yomeru u'gvoratecha yedaberu ve'odiya livnei ha'adam gevurotav v'chvod hadar malchuto malchutecha malchut kol olamim u'mehem shaldecha b'chol dor v'dor Somech Adonai l'chol hanoflim, v'zohokef l'chol hakafu hufim, einei holelecha yisahaberu, ve'atan laten lahem atochlam be'yihito, poteach et yadecha, u'masbihi l'chol charatzom, Tzadik Adonai b'chol derachav, v'chasid b'chol ha'masav. Karov Adonai l'chol korav, l'chol asher yikra'u be'emet. Ritzon Yereyav Yaseh, Ve'et Shavatam Yishma v'yoshiyem, Shomer Adonai et kol ohavav, Ve'et kalishayim yashmin. Dilat Adonai yedaber pi, V'varecha basar Shem kodsho leilam voed. V'anachnu nevarech me'ata v'yad olam. Hallelujah.
We turn to the next page.
Yahalalu et Shem Adonai ki niskav Shemo levado hodo al eretz v'shamayim vayaharem keren v'yamo tila l'chol chasidav livnei Yisrael am kerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
We face the ark. Because we're singing Eitz Chaim Hi.
Eitz Chaim Hi, L'machazik Imo, V'tomacheha Meushar, Deracheha, Darchei Noam, V'chol Netivoteha, Shalom, Hashivenu Adonai, Elecha v'nashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh Yameinu, Chadesh Yameinu Kikedem.
We prepare now for the Amidah and for the Musaf service as we head directly in. You have options at this time are numerous. First, you could mute the screen and do a silent Amidah, or you could mute the screen and focus on the slides that will come before you, or you could leave the sound on and go through the slides after following as we go through, starting with the Chatzi Kaddish. Or you can do what many people I'm sure are doing, which is watching whether I really have control of the wire here on the bima. But I commend one of the first three options. We continue and head into Musaf. We begin with the Chatzi Kaddish on page 298.
Yitkadal v'kedash Shemei Rabbah B'yamad yivrach hirotei V'yamlich malchutei B'chayechon u'v'yomechon U'v'chayei D'chol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'rimeru. Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah mevorach Le'olam lo me'almaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpor v'yitromam v'yitnasei v'yitadar v'yit'ale v'yithalal shmei dekudesha berichu Le'ela mikol berchata v'shirata תושבחת ונחמת דמירן בימיו יאמרו אמן.
$312.
הנני ממעש נרעש ונבחר מפחד יושב תהילות ישראל. באתי לעמוד לחנן לפניך על עמך ישראל אשר שלחוני. אף על פי שאני חדי וכיון לכך, לכן אבקש ממך, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל, ואלוהי לאה. אדוני, אדוני אל רחום וחנון אלוהי ישראל, שדי היום ונורא. היה נא מצליח דרכי, אשר אני הולך לעמוד לבקש רחמים עלי, ויעל שוכי. בעבור כל הצדיקים והחסידים התמימים והישרים, ועבור כבוד שמך הגדול והנורא, כי אתה שומע תפילת עמך ישראל ברחמים, ברוך אתה שומע תפילה.
Page 313.
Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Ve'Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Ve'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Ve'Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, Elyon. Gomel Chasadim Tovim. וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדיו, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מיסוד חכמים ונבונים, ואילם מדע מבינים. עבדך אבי בתפילה ותחנונים, לכלות ולחנן פני מלך מלא מרחמים, מוכר וסולח לעוונים.
We face the ark as we invite in the choral voices and continue.
זכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, וכותבנו בספר החיים, למענך אלוהים חיים. מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ufoked Sarah. Ata gibor le'olam Adonai, mechayim metim ata v'hoshia. Mechakel chayim b'chesed, mechayim metim b'rachamim rabim, somer nofim v'rofei cholim, umatir asurim. ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר מחמוך בעל גבורות ומידו מלך מליך ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה. מי כמוך אהבה רחמים, זוכה יצוריו לחיים ברחמים. ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים.
We continue on page 315 for Unatana Tokef.
ובכן אוכל תלך את הקדושה, יתלהנו מלך מלכי וסלח.
Let us speak of the sacred power of this day, profound and awe-inspiring. On it, your sovereignty is celebrated, and your throne from which you rule in truth is established with love. Truly, you are judge and prosecutor, expert and witness, completing the indictment, bringing the case, and enumerating the counts. You recall all that is forgotten, and will open the book of remembrance, which speaks for itself, for our own hands have signed the page.
ובשופר גדול ייתקע, 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 ייתקע. וכל המעמד הקע יישמע. ומלאכים יחבזון, וחיל אורדה יוחזון, ויאמרו הנה יום הדין. ויאמרו הנה יום הדין. לפקוד עצמם מרום בדין. כי לא יזכו בעיניך בדין. וכל באי עולם יעברו לפניך כי בני מרון. כבקרת רו, מה ברצונותיך שבטו, כן תעביר ותספור ותמנה ותקרב נפש כל חי. ותחכוך קצבה לכל בריאה, ותכתוב את קצבה דינם.
On Rosh Hashanah it is written, and on the fast day of atonement it is sealed. Rosh Hashanah yikatevun, uvyom tzom Kippur yechatemun. How many will pass on, how many will be born, who will live and who will die, who will live a long life and who will come to an untimely end, who will perish by fire, by water, by sword, by beast, by hunger, by thirst, by earthquake and plague, who will be strangled and stoned, at peace or troubled, serene or disturbed, tranquil and tormented, impoverished and enriched, who will be brought low and who will be raised up. but teshuvah and tefillah and tzedakah have the power to transform the intensity of our destiny. We continue with the Kedusha at the top of page. We'll continue with what Cantor Neil continues with, and I will announce the proper page.
There's a recording.
There is no recording.
Then I'll do it live. Rosh Hashanah yikatehevun uvyom etzom Kippur yechatehevun kama yavrun v'chama yibareyon mi yechye u'mi yamot mi v'kitzo u'mi lo v'kitzo Rosh Hashanah yikatehevun uvyom etzom Kippur yechatehevun mi ba'esh u'mi b'mayim mi b'cherev u'mi b'chaya mi b'rav u'mi b'tzama Rosh Hashanah yikatehevun uvyom etzom Kippur yechatehevun mi barash u'mi b'magifa mi b'chanika u'mi b'skila mi yanuach u'mi yanuah mi yashkit u'mi yitoraf mi yishalev mi yityaser mi ani u'mi ashir mi yishpal u'mi yarom u'teshuvah u'tfilah u'tzedakah mabiyun el roah hagazera.
ויהיו כל עבדך ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה ויברכו שם כבודך ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה ויגידו.
I apologize for my errors. I think that fasting is supposed to produce these, so I'll consider these to heaven sent. On page 317, we have the Kedusha. Some of you may be wondering why sometimes we open the ark, but we're not facing the ark. The answer is that in Jewish tradition, one has an option that one can either face the ark for certain prayers, like the Kedusha, or one can face the congregation out of respect for the congregation, Kavod Hatzibor. We practice the latter custom, top of 317.
Ksotziach sarfei kodesh amakdishim shimcha makodesh darim alem darim ata kakadu yadav yacha v'karazel zev yamar kadosh 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 Adonai tzvaot melech haaretz kavodo kavodo malei olama mishrotav sholim zeh lazeh ayei mekom kavodo lihumata baruch yomeru Baruch Yevod Adonai Mimkomo Yifen Barachamim V'achonam Helachadim Shemo Erev V'boker B'kol Yom Tamid Pamayim B'yava Shema Omrim Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Hu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu Malkeinu Moshiach,נו והוא ישמיר ברחמיו שנית לעיני כל חי, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אדיר, אדירנו, אדוני אדוננו, מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני חי ושמו אחד. ובדברי קדשך כתוב לאמור, ימלוך את העולם אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ונצח נצחים פירושך נקדיש ששליחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד כי המלך הדור וקדוש אתה.
If we continue the channeling of that angelic energy and take it forward into the future, we have a lot to look forward to with Via Atayu, and we've now earned some of our humor.
ואתה יוקול לעבדך ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה ויברכו שם כבודך ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה ויגידו ואם צדקך ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה וירשוך עמים לא ידעוך ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה ויהללוך כל אספי ארץ ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה ויאמרו תמיד יגדל אדוני ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה ויזנחו את עצה בהם ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה ויחפרו עם פסיליהם ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה ויעטו שכם אחד לעבדך ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה
I wanted different wings. Top of page 323.
קדוש אתה ונורא שמך, ואין אלוה מבלעדיך, ככתוב, ויקבע אדוני צבאות המשפט, והאל הקדוש נקדש בשכה, ברוך אתה אדוני, המלך הקדוש. אתה בחרתנו מכל העמים, אהבת אותנו ורצית בנו, ורוממתנו מכל השונות, וקידשתנו במצוותיך, וקרבתנו מלכנו לעבודתך, ושמך הגדול והקדוש עלינו קראת. ותיתן לנו אדוני אלוהינו בעבודת יום הכיפורים הזה, למחילה ולסליחה ולכפרה, למחול בו כל עוונותינו מקרא קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים.
We turn to the Aleinu, page 325.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת קדלה ויוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגוי הרצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו קם וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Our God and God of our ancestors, be with the messengers of your people as they stand praying for the ability to plead before you on our behalf. Teach them what to say, inspire them in their speech, respond to their requests, instruct them how to properly glorify you, and maybe on this day, how properly use technology on your behalf. May they walk in the light of your presence and bend their knees to you. May your people be blessed through the words of their mouths, and may all find blessing through the blessings of your mouth. The Avodah service follows the great Aleinu that we just experienced. It can be found in the coming pages, just a little ways away. And I actually don't have the page number on me. Maybe Neil will find it for me as oh, there it is. So the Avodah service really, it begins in multiple places, but 327, 326, 327, and forward. So sometimes in the Jewish world, something happens that in my whole life I didn't quite expect. Although I know the Avodah service is greatly meaningful to some, I've always struggled to find a way to make it really resonate and relevant. And so something that happened which I would not have expected is that the Avodah service has become a very, very popular song in Eretz Yisrael. So coming up, I've done my best to, if you pay attention to your screen, to follow through what is actually happening in the Avodah service and to participate in it as you listen to Ishad Rebo's now well-known and beautiful words and tune.
נכנס למקום שנכנס ועמד במקום שעמד, רחץ ידיו רגליו, טבל עליו ונסתפק. בא ממקום שהוא בא והלך למקום שהלך, פשט בגדי החול, לבש בגדי לבן, וכך היה אומר אנא השם, כפר לחטאים, לעוונות ולפשעים שחטאתי לפניך אני וביתי. ואם אדם היה יכול לזכור את הפגמים, את החסרונות, את כל הפשעים, את כל העוונות, בטח כך היה מונה אחת, אחת ואחת, אחת ושתיים, אחת ושלוש, אחת וארבע, אחת וחמש. ישר היה מתייאש, כי לא יכול היה לשאת את המרירות החטא, את הבושה, את הפספוס, את ההפסד. והכהנים והעם העומדים בעזרה, כשהיו שומעים את שם השם המפורש יוצא מפי, כהן גדול היו קוראים, משתחווים ונופלים על פניהם. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. ממקום שיצא ורעד במקום שעמד, פשט בגדי זהב, לבש בגדי עצמו, וכל העם והכהנים היו מלווים אותו לביתו, ויום טוב לאוהביו, כי נסלח לכל עדת ישראל.
That final blessing, if you want to spend more time with it, can be found on page 334 as Neil chants at the top of page 330.
וכך היה אומר אנא השם, חטאתי, עוויתי, פשעתי לפניך אני וביתי. ענב השם כפר נא לחטאים ולעוונות ולפשעים, שחטאתי ושעוויתי ושפשעתי לפניך אני וביתי. ככתוב בתורת משה עבדך, כי ביום הזה יכפר לכם לטהר אתכם מכל חטאותיכם לפני אדוני. והכהנים והעם העומדים בעזרה כשהיו שומעים את השם הנכבד והנורא מפורש יוצא מפי כהן גדול בקדושה וטהרה היו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים ונופלים על פניהם ואומרים ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד.
We continue on page 336.
Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chayun, Erech Hayim, V'Rach Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed Avim, Notzer Avon V'Fesha V'Chata V'Nakei.
The Elez Korah service starts on page 337. I'm looking forward to being in person next year and having Professor Norwich read for us, having others who so often share their words and their poetry with us to get us in the mood. This year, because we're doing the service this way, I thought I would take the opportunity to share something from Yad Vashem. As you probably know by now, this being my third High Holy Days, I believe that part of our essential mission is not forgetting the Holocaust. And while all of the martyrs from all of time are important, I can't imagine having the holiest of our days, our Shabbat of Shabbats, not include witness testimony from the Holocaust. So I now share with you a recording of eyewitness testimony from Yad Vashem.
Milan with my mother, Anna, and my grandmother, Leah, after my father disappeared, my father, Misha. My mother worked during the day, and when she came home in the afternoon, she always ran to me, and I ran to her. We clung to each other, and I never left her side. I was very attached to my mother, and there was a strong, special bond between us. My mother used to play with me. My mother used to read me stories and fairy tales, and my mother always answered all my questions. Although there was a war going on and my father was gone, I was a carefree little girl. One day in January 1944, my happy childhood came to an end. It all began when my mother was called to the public phone, which was at the entrance to our building. She went downstairs, and I, as usual, followed her. I couldn't hear what she said, because she whispered into the phone, but when she put down the phone, I saw that she was pale. I asked, "Mama, why are you pale? What happened to you?" But my mother didn't answer me. She went quickly upstairs, and she and grandmother packed in a hurry 2 suitcases. I asked, "Mama, where are we going?" But again, my mother didn't answer me. And I sensed that something terrible was going to happen. My mama and my nonna took the 2 suitcases, and I took my doll, Angelica, and I embraced her to me. We went in silence. After a long walk, we reached a big building. Inside a room stood a Nazi by his desk. He ordered my mother and grandmother to sit on a bench that was in that room. To my surprise, I saw there our Christian neighbor, who also sat down on that bench next to my mother. The Nazi told me to stand by his side. Then he asked me in a regular voice, "What is your name?" I said, "Judita." He asked, "With whom do you want to go, Judita?" I knew I had to answer right away, and I looked at my mother. But I didn't recognize my mother for a minute. She looked so different, so strange. She looked as if she had a white mask on her face, and her eyes, that always looked at me with love, looked at me as if they said, "Danger, don't choose me." I didn't understand why, but I pointed at the Christian neighbor. At that minute, the Nazi shouted something and 2 soldiers came in. They grabbed my grandmother by her shoulders and pushed her out of the room. Then they went towards my mother. When I realized that she too would soon disappear, I ran to her. But when I almost reached her, the Nazi caught me and held me tight. My mother stretched out her arms to me, but the Nazi drew me back. My mother opened her mouth to say something to me, but no word, no sound came out. I cried, "Mama, Mama," but they brutally pushed her out of the room. I stood by the empty bench, and I knew I was alone. Suddenly, the Christian neighbor came to me, held my hand, and took me out of that room. She told me that she couldn't keep me because she was poor and had 5 girls of herself, but she would bring me to a place where I will be taken care of. And she brought me to a convent. Mother Superior waited for us at the gate. She smiled at me and she asked me for my name and age. I told her, and I said, "My name is Judita and I don't want to be here. I want to go home." In bed, I told myself that if they don't let me be a Jew, or even one person, then I will be 2 girls instead of 1. During the day, I will be the Christian girl and they will call me Dita. And I will tell to myself every night, I am a Jew and my name is Judita. And in this way, no one will be angry at me because Jesus will be happy, and Mother Superior and all the nuns that I am a Christian, and God and my mother and my grandmother will be happy that I am a Jew. And because they will be happy, they will bring me back my mama.
With the arrival of the Jewish Brigade of the British Army in Italy, they began searching for Jewish children in convents in order to bring them back into the fold of the Jewish community.
About 1 month after the war in 1945, in May, I was sure that now my mother will come back to me and my grandmother because the war ended and there's no reason that she won't come. So every day I went to the gate and I looked out in the hope of seeing my mother coming for me and taking me home. A few days after that, a girl came running to me and said, "You have guests, go quickly to Mother Superior. A man and a woman have come for you." And I was sure that it was my mother and father. So I ran quickly and I opened the door without waiting, and I was very disappointed that I saw 2 strangers, a man and a woman. And the man came to me, he shook my hand and said, "Shalom, I am Tzvika, a soldier of the Jewish Brigade, And this is Leah from Eretz Israel. And he said, we are Jewish. Do you know that you are a Jew too? I said, yes. He said, because you are a Jew, we want to take you out of here, of the convent, because it is a Christian convent, and bring you to Eretz Israel. And I didn't know anything about Eretz Israel then, and I didn't want to be dragged out again. And I said, I won't go, no one will take me. And Mother Superior said, I told you that she won't go with you. And they said, Yehudit, you are not a Christian, so you have to be and live with the people that you belong to. And Mother Superior said, Dita, you are very dear to me. I don't want you to go. Jesus saved you. Under his protection, you are safe. And Leah said, she doesn't belong to you. She was only put in your custody. And Leah came to me and she kneeled down and looked me straight in the eyes and said, Yehudit, you're 7 years old. You're a big girl already. So you have to understand, here in the convent, you found a temporary shelter. Now that the war is over, we are going to all the convents and taking out all the Jewish children and bringing them to Eretz Israel. Your place is not here in Italy, it's there in Eretz Israel. Mother Superior said to me, Dita, you have to make a very difficult decision. Go to the little room and think over where you want to be. After half an hour, we will call you, and you will tell us what you have decided. I went upstairs, and I was very confused. I didn't know what to do. On the one hand, I was used to being in the convent. I was there a year and a half already. I had 4 girls that were good friends of mine. I had 2 nuns that liked me and Mother Superior that loved me. And then I said to myself, Leah said that all the Jews are going now to Eretz Israel. That means that my mother and grandmother are also there. Yes, I will go with them. So just then a girl came and told me to go to Mother Superior, to the room. And when I entered the room, the 3 of them looked at me in expectation. And when I said, I will go with the Jews, Mother Superior became pale. And she asked me, dear child, are you sure? And I said, yes, Mother. And Tzvika and Leah smiled, a big smile. They were very happy. One day, when I was about 10 years old, I received a letter and a package from my aunt in England. And I asked her if she knows what happened to my mother, to my father, and to my grandmother. So she ignored me. She told me many other things. She didn't want to tell me. So when I became 12 years old, she asked me what I want for bat mitzvah. And I said, I only want you to tell me the truth, what happened to my mother and grandmother and father. So she said about my father that my father disappeared and was never found again. And my mother and my grandmother were deported to Auschwitz and perished there. And I was very angry, and I said, this aunt doesn't know anything, they are not dead. And I couldn't accept it. Actually, they were dead a week after they arrived. And it was written the 30th of January, 1944.
After this institution was closed, the children were transferred to Kfar Batya, a youth village established after World War II for child Holocaust survivors. At the age of 12, she went to live with her aunt Margaret in Haifa. Yehudit served in the army, studied teaching, and was a teacher for many years. She married and is a mother.
I missed my mother most, first of all, when I gave birth to my children, with each child. And I was very sorry for my mother that she didn't get to see her grandchildren. Actually, I was one of those who didn't tell anything for years. One day, one morning, when the children had breakfast, and my daughter was still in her room, she hung up 2 dresses that we bought for her the day before. One was yellow, one was blue, and she had tears of frustration in her eyes because she couldn't decide which dress to wear for her kindergarten. And I was amazed seeing her, so touched by such a simple choice. And then all of a sudden I saw myself exactly at her age having to choose not between 2 dresses, but between my mother and the Christian neighbor. And I said to myself, it was so horrible, how, because I repressed it, so I didn't think about it before. The first thing I did, I brought her to her kindergarten, and when I came back, I went and bought many copybooks, children's copybooks, and started writing everything that happened to me. It all came up because of such a trivial decision. And that's how I wrote my book, and that's how I started talking and coming to Yad Vashem, and on and on.
$346.
Shema koleinu, Adonai Eloheinu, chutz v'rachem aleinu, v'kabel b'rachem v'ratzon et v'hilateinu. Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva chadesh ameinu kehekadem. Al tashlichenu mi'ofanecha v'ruach chodsheka al tikach mimenu. Al tashlichenu li'et zigna ki chlot golchenu al tazvenu. Eloheinu v'elei avoteinu al tazvin latishenu al tachlimenu v'al tafer b'kayitanu korvinu toratecha lamdenu mitzvotecha Horeinu torachecha ad libeinu lirayat shemecha u'molen levaveinu ahavatecha v'nashuv elecha v'emet v'lev shalem ולמען שמך הגדול תמך ותסלח לעווננו ככתוב בדברי קודשך ימען שמך אדוני וסלחת לעווני כי רבו.
347 for Ki Anu Amecha.
Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu Slach lanu, machal lanu, kaper lanu. Ki anu amecha v'yata Eloheinu, anu vanecha v'yata avinu, anu avadecha v'yata Adoneinu, Anu kalecha v'yata chelkeinu, Anu nachalatecha v'yata goraleinu, Anu tzonecha v'yata roeinu, Anu karmecha v'yata notreinu, Anu fulatecha v'yata yotzreinu, Anu rayatecha v'yata dodeinu, Anu skulatecha v'yata kroveinu, Anu amecha v'yata malkeinu, Anu maminecha v'yata mamineinu.
We continue at the bottom of the page.
Hanu azefani vataraku v'chanon anak shior v'eta erech apayim anu b'lei avon v'eta b'rei rachamim Hanu yameinu katzei over v'eta ushnotecha lo yitamu
348.
Eloheinu v'Eloi avoteinu ta'avo lefanecha tfilat tevatila midchinatenu שאנחנו אין אנחנו אז פנים וכשעורף לומר לפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו צדיקים אנחנו ולא חטאנו אבל אנחנו ואבותינו חטאנו
Ashamnu.
איי 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 אשמנו בגדנו גזלנו, דיברנו דופי, איי 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 הבינו והרשענו, זדנו, חמסנו, טפלנו שקר, איי 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 יעצנו רע, כיספנו, לחצנו, מרדנו, ניאצנו, שררנו, אבינו, פשענו, צררנו, כשינו עורף. איי 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 רשענו, שיחתנו, תיעבנו, טעינו, תיתנו.
We continue directly with the second confessional, the Al Chet, on page 351.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך באונס וברצון, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך באימוץ הלב, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בבלי דעת, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בביטוי שפתיים, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בגילוי עריות, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בגילוי וסתר, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בדעת ובמרמה, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בדיבור פה.
We have sinned against you knowingly and deceitfully. We have sinned against you by the way we talk. We have sinned against you by scorning parents and teachers. And we have sinned against you purposely and by mistake.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך ביצרה, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך ביודעים ולא יודעים, ועל כולם אלוה סליחות, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בכחש ובכזב, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בחפת שוחד, על שחטאנו לפניך בלצון, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בלשון הרע.
352, we have sinned against you in everyday conversation. We have sinned against you through conspiratorial glances. We've sinned against you through condescension. We have sinned against you through ego.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בעיניים רמות, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בעזות מצח, ועל כולם אלוה סליחות, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בפריקת עול, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בפלילות. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בתשומת יד, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בתימהור לבב, ועל כולם אלוה סליחות, סלח לנו, מחל לנו, כפר לנו.
353 toward the bottom of the page.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך באונס, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך ברצון, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בסתר, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בגלוי, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בשוגג, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך במזיד.
The Al Kulam.
V'al kulam Eloah selichot salach lanu mechal lanu kaper lanu V'al kulam Eloah selichot salach lanu mechal lanu kaper lanu.
We linger in our thoughts and we bring those thoughts into the blessings on page 356.
Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu, baruchenu b'amracha meshuleshet, b'Torah k'tuva ayadei Moshe avdecha, ha'amura mipi Aaron avanav kohanim, am kedoshecha kamur, yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Kei ratzon. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka. Kei ratzon. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. Kei ratzon. Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha. Baruchenu avinu kulanu ke'echad be'or panecha, ki be'or panecha natata lanu Adonai Eloheinu. Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha. Torat chayim ve'avat chesed u'tzedaka uveracha v'rachamim v'chayim v'shalom v'rachamim v'chayim v'shalom. Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha. V'tov b'einecha levarech et amcha Yisrael v'chol et uv'chol sha'ar b'shlomecha. Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha. B'sefer Chaim bracha v'shalom u'farnasa tova nizacher v'nihater lefanecha. Hananu v'chol amecha beit Yisrael l'chaim tovim u'leshalom.
Shana Tova. On Erev Rosh Hashanah, I talked about how the pandemic is really forcing us to take the Shabbat that we haven't been taken. And on second day Rosh Hashanah, I talked about how the pandemic has forced us to have a sabbatical year that the Torah insists upon that we haven't been taking, one that connects us to our values and our ancestors. And today, I want to take you on a journey of something else that the pandemic has been pressuring us to revisit, to accompany us in our homes. in this time. Judaism is sometimes referred to in comparative religious studies as a walking mysticism. Following in the tradition of our shepherd ancestors, Judaism is a way of communing with God on journey. As we mystically, when we're on these journeys, we draw in the past, we see how we're not different from our ancestors, how we're becoming them. We identify with them. And we focus on what the present needs by then channeling the future into it. How is this moment on this journey appreciated as its own moment, but also unavoidably connected with the goals, destinations? Or otherwise, it's aimless. As in God's name, which only on Yom Kippur, the High Kohen says out loud. Not this High Kohen, because not quite yet, close. No, but the high priest. The meaning of Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, past, present, future, all at the same time. But as a walking mysticism, one never fully arrives, for that would end our connection to God. The journey is one that continues and continues by continually bringing about the future that drives the journey. As the biblical theologian John Levinson says, Jewish faith is different from the term faith in other traditions. Jewish faith is a promissory faith. Our faith is that we live in covenantal partnership with God. We have the power to bring about the future that we both wish for in this world as an ongoing process that strangely is always a journey of channeling the future into the present, always journeying, always channeling the God, Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, the God whose name is becoming. In this walking mysticism, this journey of communing with God, we have a companion. At the end of the journey in the Torah, it says, you will have a companion from now on. It's the Torah. It's not a laundry list of rules and regulations. It's God's embodiment in a book. We commune with it, and when we bring our greatest love, our most charitable readings, our identification, our deepest fears, our greatest hopes, it softens our hearts and sharpens our wits, reveals our past, reveals our present, and accompanies us with love into the future. And if we're being honest, and this is a day for that, we too often lapse into not traveling our lives with Torah in conversation. We too often treat Torah as an exotic oddity. It's a bunch of fairy tales, but there's some really good values in there that we take forward. It's the product of an archaic time. It's the form of comparative literature. It's a document by some authors who crave publication to achieve some eternal tenure, and the only price they had to pay was passing it off as God's. Maybe more wish fulfillment of the scholars who come up with these theories. What all of these approaches are based on is that the book is somehow foreign to me. It's Torah Zara, a foreign instruction. When what our tradition, whose central spiritual practice is reading, is trying to tell us that it's your soul's home, and when you connect to it, when you commune with it, the foreignness of the society around you is brought into relief. The Torah is not the distant object in the heavens. Sometimes the distant object is the land you're residing in. When you make Torah close to your heart, you will choose life. So we have been on some journey this year. I don't have to tell you that. We keep saying that this time is unprecedented, and some would like it to be unprecedented. But is it really unprecedented? What has life been like to take the journey as a walking mysticism with Torah as our companion? So what I want you to do is I'm offering you the option to close your eyes if you want. This may be the only year to experience my sermon on the lazy boy, so you might as well take advantage today. Let's take the walking mysticism with the Torah. Just before the pandemic, we were reading in the Torah how a new king had unexpectedly taken power in Egypt. The Torah suggests that he was not the expected successor, but arose by garnering popular support, by claiming that the immigrant refugee Hebrews who had been living symbiotically in Egypt and who had been contributing to society were actually their greatest threat. He claimed that they were multiplying like an infestation and that they could not be trusted. Their privileges should be removed and their freedoms. In response, God sends plagues, telling Moses that the plagues will reveal the hubris of Pharaoh's power. Each plague will challenge Pharaoh's rule, demonstrate to the people the inherent weakness of a system based on exclusion, hoarded privilege, and structural racism. And each plague will be an opportunity for Pharaoh to change course. But the Pharaoh will double down each time with a hardened heart as each wave of crisis recedes. But through each one, people will realize that the Pharaoh's rule of force is based on impotence and not on power. We then read about the plagues themselves, and we studied them. Unlike the false Sunday school narrative that they are supernatural, the Torah simply states that they come from God, from the system, to reveal Pharaoh's stubbornness and weakness, to reveal our purpose. The plagues are interesting themselves. Insects, vermin, wild beasts, the death of cattle. We wonder whether there's any interconnection. In our own day, we have learned that viruses like HIV, the H1N1 swine flu, the rodent hantavirus, and possibly COVID-19 may well have their origins and combinations of these. As humans deforest and spread into wild habitats, mostly and especially to raise animals for meat, wild animals and bats containing such viruses find themselves in close proximity to domesticated animals and the rodents nearby. And also to the humans who wish to cage them close together for meat consumption. And these viruses are transmitted to the animals and to their handlers. We were reading this part of the Torah as the plague was spreading in China. And then we read the plague of locusts. And during that time, did you know that the planet was in the midst of the worst locust plague in 70 years, reiterating the journey of Torah in our time? What did our locust plague reveal? Well, it wasn't accidental that locusts have raged across the Middle East and Africa this past year. Governments so rife with corruption and entrenched civil wars and division didn't focus on public health and the locust plague. In their posturing, corruption, rivalries, and self-centeredness, they didn't realize that it was cooperation that was required to check the plague. Locusts don't know about borders, and they fly over them. Countries turned inward and would not work cooperatively to eradicate them. And so the swarms grew and grew. And so the locust plague revealed an obvious truth. In order to address the truth of interconnectedness in our system, we must act collectively and not live with the illusion that individual actions can combat the illnesses in our system. Individual actions, while admirable, do not cure cancer, solve poverty, heal the environment. Locusts teach us that thinking an individual or country can stop a plague shares in the same illusion that Pharaoh had, that an individual can control the system. It's the opposite of recognizing God. So that's the theological message of the plagues and of their implications. And then the 10th plague arrived, simply plague itself, an invisible killer that spreads. Pharaoh's claim of having mastery over the world is shown to be an empty boast. Pharaoh's unable to protect his own people. The Israelites begin their history by sheltering in place, the very beginning of our calendar, with sheltering in place. The first moment of Israelite history, putting red blood on the doorposts, shutting the door, not unlike the red crosses put on the doors in later European plagues to indicate quarantine. And so the synagogue in our society shut down just before Passover. Those who had been fortunate enough to be sheltering in place in relative safety, those who had not been so fortunate at terrible risk, as we reiterated the original Seder, sometimes by Zoom. There is no new experience under the heavens. We had learned that we live in the vast interconnected system of so many causes and effects that it's human hubris to think we can control it, rather than use cooperation, humanity, and Torah to share it and respect it. So the Israelites left and leave that broken system behind. They reach Mount Sinai. We read as they established a society based on what had been missing: compassion for the poor, love of the stranger, respect for the interconnectedness of the system. And as Joshua Berman argues in his excellent book, Created Equal, how the Bible broke with ancient political thought, We were introduced to a radical society based on the view that we are all made in the image of God, a society which values equity as primary. Interestingly, as we left Egypt, the Torah reveals an awkward interchange with the Egyptian people. Did we borrow the money? Were they on loan? Did they offer to pay us? They didn't need to pay us because we were slaves. And as we were reading that, some of us were wondering, can I get my money back from the child care center? Can I get a refund on some of the college tuition? If it's not open anyway, or if it's different, should I not do that because I'll bankrupt them? Do businesses pay workers or let them fall into poverty and desperation when the business isn't open? So just as in the Torah, the pandemic was revealing to us a piece of Torah, what we don't want to think about, the moral dimension of our money. Do we owe anything to our fellow citizen, especially in a country founded on inequality and slavery itself? Or do we just not talk about it until in the pandemic we have to? And it's awkward because it's so real. It's a little bit like last year's Rosh Hashanah sermon. And by the end of March, we were already in Leviticus and seemingly out of place description of the ritual practice of the Israelite leadership practicing teshuvah. I confess that after all these years, I've overlooked this chapter. The leader of the people brings an offering before all the people and explains that as leader, they accept that their actions have consequences on the entire people, and they state where they have unwittingly erred. They acknowledge the damage they've caused to the real people, real lives, and they promise to learn from their mistakes so they don't make them again. The very model of teshuvah. You do not need to be perfect. No one is. But you acknowledge the damage, and you do need to grow. When leaders fail to grow, we rely on those who are local, who serve the community, and so we did. We relied on those who minister to the sick, ensure public safety, and distribute the food, the preoccupation of the book of Leviticus. As the death toll rose, we read the story of Aaron the high priest, which normally we say it's so terrible and so ridiculous that here it is that Aaron the high priest needs to delay his grieving over the death of his sons so he could fulfill his function as a designated essential worker by the Torah. As we watched our people, our essential workers put aside their grief and their fears, their concern for their loved ones, sometimes sleeping in the basement, in a separate place, so they could work full-time, tirelessly for the public's good, helping the ill, feeding people, filling labs, rushing to develop vaccines. And then Leviticus warns them, don't let this become a servant class. That's what happened to you. It can happen. So the essence of the holiness code is, part of which we read today, and we will read more later, is to prevent anyone from falling into a state where they have the qualities of servitude and we ignore their cries. And suddenly we saw around us, are we exploiting the economic disadvantage of others and producing a new servant class? Are we calling them our heroes, thanking them for doing our Instacart, when what they want is the right to be safe at home without becoming homeless? What does it mean that grocery store workers are called into the back room, told that they are now heroes? Go right back out there and help that person find the mushroom risotto that they're looking for. Their anxiety and grief and vulnerability, don't want to hear it. Out of a job, go shopping for somebody else. And this weird confusion. Yeah, food is essential, and the virus has brought with it enormous food insecurity, particularly among those beneath the poverty line and who rely on school lunches as their main meal of the day. But no, does essential food for all mean that we continue the food exactly as before? The confusion being exposed in the Torah as, on the one hand, the Israelites over and over again look to God to provide food and water on this dangerous journey, but once receiving it, then complain about it not being as good as the food they had in Egypt. And they wish they could just return to the way things were. And we're told, you have to fight that impulse. Leviticus warned us that if we don't treat the earth with love and respect, it will have its Sabbaths. And as we talked about on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, so it has demanded by stilling the fossil fuel drills, by stilling the exhaust on our highways, by stilling our consumption and wasting. And when you just couldn't believe these synchronicities of Torah with real life, that this reiteration that we're going through Torah, the cries of the shofar of injustice came from the streets of Minneapolis and spread across the country with the signs Black Lives Matter, as the Torah opened to the story of Moses' wife being called black, being called Cushite by Miriam. And there we were, Torah confronting us with our own history, our own centuries-old conversation about people of color. The tradition agrees that Miriam was coming to defend women's rights, as Moses' devotion to God had deprived Zipporah of her conjugal rights. And Rashi points out that Miriam's highlighting Moses' wife's dark skin was a compliment. But we had to look at how over the centuries, Jews have come to read the story in another way, as just assuming that Miriam was a racist, and that's just assuming that black is a derogatory term. Rashi even allows it in his own time, saying, could it have been sarcasm? Are there racist undertones not in the Torah, but in ourselves, that have been hidden from view? Have we treated the Jewish people as a club of white people in America, not really realizing that Judaism is not a white race, not realizing that it never was? How do we confront Israel's history of Ashkenazic supremacy over Sephardi, Mizrahi, and Ethiopian Jews? The great medieval commentator, the Bechor Shor, waded in as we read those parts of Torah by telling us that it's so hard to know why God is going out of his way to make sure Moses' wife, or two wives, according to one tradition, are black. That instead of really internalizing the message, it is sent by God to Jews of the future, to us, to be revealed. We are that future. And so we come to the final book of the Torah, Deuteronomy. Over these summer months, we've been working through it. It adds the fact that someday you'll probably insist on a king. And the yardstick by which to measure the future king will be whether he enriches himself while in office and whether he courts foreign alliances to financially benefit himself. But mainly, over and over again, Deuteronomy demands that the basis of a just society is a professional and unprejudiced set of judges, political officials, criminal justice officials, shoftim and shotrim, and over again, it's lending institutions. It gives a yardstick for measuring them. One of the words that just recurs over and over, special for Deuteronomy, is that one must treat everyone in society, regardless of familial ties, as brothers. Everyone is treated by the criminal justice system, they're your brother. When you're looking to lend money, everyone is your brother, particularly the one that doesn't look like they belong in your nuclear family. It warns that we're naturally drawn to favor those who look like ourselves. And so we need to judge our officials, whether they double and triple their efforts to make sure everyone is treated as their own brother. This, as we've done the work, and we have a lot of work to do, to explore institutional racism. And then the Torah comes to an end. What will be your future? What will be the next stage of the journey? What will it look like? What will our next year look like? The Torah ends with us passing between two mountains. On the one mountain, it says that if we lose our way and ignore its message, there will be calamity, environmental, financial, and social. If we keep it in our hearts as our partner and take it with us on our journey into the future, for it is not in heaven, up there only for the cognoscendi, to understand, or the angels to keep. But we are all part angel, and we are all part rabbi. We can continually build the better future, the world that is coming. What the Torah reveals, especially in a time of plague and crisis, is that the world that is coming is not a magical future. Messianic future someday will come. Hopefully I'll get saved because of something in my belief system. No. The world that is coming is the world that we make to come in this moment through that partnership. And this coming is happening at every moment. Baruch haba, Olam haba. Faith in Judaism isn't faith in the existence of a supernatural being. It's faith in the future. In a future we can bring about in partnership with the will of the universe, with God, through rereading and rereading this love letter from God, this love letter from our ancestors, our Torah. As we head into the coming year of uncertainty and anxiety, we need not give up hope when we have the Torah by our side. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks points out that this is the heart of Judaism. He writes, human beings are the only life form capable of using the future tense. Only beings who can imagine the world other than it is are capable of freedom. And if we are free, the future is open, dependent on us. We can know the beginning of our story, but we do not know the end. That is why, as God is about to take the Israelites from slavery to freedom, God tells Moses the secret of the meaning of God's name. I am what I am, I will be what I will be. The word that has it was, it is, and it will be, combined into one grammatical form. Judaism, the religion of freedom, is faith in the future tense. One of the most important distinctions I have learned, he writes, in the course of reflection on Jewish history is the difference between optimism and hope. Optimism is the belief that things will get better. Hope is the belief that together we can make things better. Optimism is a passive virtue, hope an active one. It takes no courage to be an optimist, but it takes a great deal of courage to have hope. Knowing what we do of our past, knowing no Jew can be an optimist. But Jews have never, despite a history of sometimes awesome suffering, given up hope. Hatikva. On Erev Rosh Hashanah, I said, if we're being honest, the notion of actually living Shabbat as a transformative practice has become Shabbat Zarah. It's become a strange thing to us, an exotic ritual. So the pandemic has forced us to experience Shabbat. On second day Rosh Hashanah, I said the notion of a sabbatical year reset. It's something for a trivia game. It's something from the olden days. And the pandemic has returned us to our roots, to experience it, to reset our life and values. A sabbatical year reset. And I say today, if we're being honest, we've allowed our covenantal relationship with the Torah to fade. The Torah is not an object to be dissected, like an exotic object. Trust me, it will return the favor. The Torah is our best friend, our bulwark against despair and misdirection, when we treat it as such, as our partner, as our spouse, who wants the same things that we do and reminds us of our best selves and our best goals, we bring the world that is coming into being with our partner, bringing our very best insights to her, our trust, our most charitable and authentic readings, bringing our greatest confusions, our doubts, our vulnerabilities, our humility, and seeing in her a conversation partner whose journey we never want to end as we change the world around us into the world that needs to be. Make this coming year a year of returning the Torah to your bedside table, to your daily reading. Put books about the Torah on the coffee table, the dining room table. Make it your companion. When you open it, think, this was written for me. This was meant for me. We're beginning it all over again shortly. We reconnect this year with Shabbat, with our ancestors, and with Torah. Be strong and have courage and head into the new year with it, with us, by your side. Shana Tova. We continue with Hayom, page 358.
Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom, 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 hayom. Hayom, 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 hayom. Hayom, hayom te'amtzenu. Amen. Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom, 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 hayom. Hayom, 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 hayom. Hayom, hayom tevarchenu. Amen. Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom, 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 hayom. Hayom, 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 hayom. Hayom, hayom tegadlenu. Amen. Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom, 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 hayom. Hayom, 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 hayom. Hayom tidrashenu letova. Amen. Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom, hayom tichtevenu lechayim tovim. Amen. Amen. Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom, 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 hayom. Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom tekabel barachamim uvratzon et tefilateinu. Amen. Amen. Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom, 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 hayom tishma shavateinu. Amen. Amen. Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom, 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 hayom. Hayom, hayom, hayom. Hayom, hayom titmechenu bimin tzidkecha. Amen. Amen. Yitkadav, yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
B'yom divrachurutei v'yamelich malchutei.
Malchutei.
B'chayechon uvyomechon ufchayedecha beit Yisrael b'gala uvizman kariv. V'yimru. Amen. Yeshmei Rabbah mevorach leolam me'amaya yitbarach yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpo'ah v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei de Kodesha, Brichu, Leila, Leila, Min Kol Berchata, V'Shirata, Tushbechata, V'Nechamata, Da Amirana Beyama, Tushbechata, V'Nechamata, Da Miran Beyama, V'Yimru, Amen. Tikabel slotchon uvavudchon becho Yisrael kodam avon divishmaya v'yimru. Amen. Heishlam Rabbah min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu aleinu v'al kol Yisroel v'yimru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav uyaseh shalom aleinu aleinu v'al kol Yisroel v'yimru. Amen.
I want to thank Cantor Neil for lifting up our spirits and for making this Yom Kippur this year. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you for joining us and for making the connection that you didn't have to make. No one would be knowing if you weren't watching right now, if you weren't thinking along, if you weren't paying attention. God bless you for making community in a time of distress. The service is not over. It continues with Zoom sessions of teaching at 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock. You can check the website for the descriptions. It continues with more children's activities. It continues with a 5 o'clock Zoom session with me, with the teenagers. So 3, 4, and 5, we're on. And we resume by YouTube at 6 p.m. for Mincha and approximately 7 p.m. for Ne'ilah, Rabbi Daberson leading, and Havdalah at 8 o'clock. Have your Havdalah candle at the ready at that time and a shofar if you've got it, because we'll be simultaneously by Zoom and by YouTube for Havdalah. Have an easy fest.
Zachrenu l'chaim, melech hafetz v'chaim, v'chazvenu v'sefer l'chaim, leman ko Elohim chaim. Zachrenu l'chaim, melech hafetz v'chaim, v'chasavenu v'sefer l'chaim, leman ko Elohim chaim.
Shahar avakasheka, tsuri umiskabi, erok levaneka shakri vegam arbi, lifne gedulateka, emod be'ebahel, ki enecha tireko makshevot libi, mazeh asher yuchal halev halashon לעשות ומכוח רוחי בתוך קרבי. הנה לך תיטב זמרת אנוש, על כן אודך בעתיה נשמת אלוהי.
Zu Yisroel, zu